Enjoy Dark Tales from the Twisted Typewriter.
I live in a pretty standard apartment building, the kind that's built to pack in as many people as possible while still charging you an arm and a leg for rent. It's nothing special. Thin walls, noisy neighbors, the usual. But something happened last week, and I haven't been able to sleep since. It all started with a smell. I noticed it when I came home from work on Wednesday night. At first, I thought someone was cooking something awful. You know how smells linger in the hallway of apartment buildings? But this wasn't like anything I'd smelled before. It was heavy, rancid, like meat left out too long in the heat. It turned my stomach. I held my breath and hurried to my door, hoping it would go away by the morning. The second I got inside, I locked the door and tried to forget about it. But even in my apartment, the smell seemed to seep through the walls, faint but persistent. The next day, the smell was worse. It hit me like a wall the moment I stepped into the hallway. Thick and suffocating. Something was seriously wrong. I glanced around and noticed it seemed to be coming from the apartment across from mine, apartment 301. I'd never met the guy who lived there. He was quiet, kept to himself. Sometimes I'd hear him moving around at odd hours, but I'd never seen him leave his apartment. Not once. I figured maybe he worked from home or something, but now I was starting to worry. What if something had happened to him? I knocked on the door, no answer. I knocked again, harder this time, but still nothing. The smell was unbearable by now, and I was starting to get nervous. I thought about calling the landlord, but he was useless. He barely fixed anything in the building. So I called the non-emergency line for the local police, explaining that I thought something might be wrong with my neighbor. An hour later, 2 officers showed up. I let them into the building and pointed them to apartment 301. They knocked, calling out for the tenant, but no one answered. One of the officers pulled out a small tool and popped the door open. The second the door swung open, the smell hit us full force. I had to step back, covering my mouth and nose. Inside the apartment was a mess. Trash piled up, dirty dishes everywhere, but no sign of the tenant with a quick scan at the entry. The officers went in to check every room, and I waited in the hallway, my heart racing and my palms sweating. I hadn't felt this much anxiety since my skydiving experience when I was 20. I was just imagining them finding my neighbor, or what was left of him, perhaps in the bathtub or on the floor of a back room. After what felt like forever, one of the officers came back out. He looked a little pale, but he said they didn't find anyone inside. No body, no sign of a struggle, just an empty apartment. But the smell? It was bad. The officer said they'd report it and have someone from building maintenance come to clean the place up. I thanked them and went back into my apartment, relieved that nothing worse had been discovered. Still, the smell lingered in the hallway, and it took a few days for the maintenance crew to finally come by and clean out 301. That's when things got weird. A few nights after the police had come by, I woke up to a strange sound. This low, scraping noise, like furniture being dragged across the floor. It was coming from 301. At first, I thought maybe the maintenance crew was back, but it was 3 a.m. There was no way they were working that late. I lay there, listening, trying to figure out what the sound was. It wasn't just scraping. There was this faint tapping, like someone pacing back and forth, their footsteps soft but steady. The more I listened, the more unsettled I felt. There wasn't supposed to be anyone in that apartment. I told myself it was just the pipes, or maybe something else in the building. Old buildings make weird noises, right? But the next night, it happened again. The same scraping, the same tapping, always around 3 a.m. I started getting paranoid, lying awake at night, waiting for the sounds to start. Each time they were a little louder, a little more deliberate, like someone was dragging something heavy across the floor right by my bedroom. I was losing sleep and jumping at every little noise during the day. One night, concerned by the strange noises, I peeked out my door's peephole at apartment 301. The door seemed to be rattling slightly, just a slight shaking, but I saw it, and the doorknob looked as if someone was slowly turning it, but the door never opened. What was going on? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. In the morning, I went to the landlord, demanding to know if someone had moved into 301. He looked at me like I was crazy. "No one's moved in yet," he said. "That place is still vacant." That was the last thing I wanted to hear. The next night, the sounds were worse. The tapping turned into thudding, the scraping into violent dragging. I could hear it clearly, like something was being hauled across the entire apartment. I thought about calling the police again, but what would I even say? That I was hearing noises from an apartment that was supposed to be empty? I decided to check for myself. It was 2:45 a.m. and I was wide awake, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I grabbed a flashlight, slipped out of my apartment, and stood in front of the door to 301. My face felt hot and flushed as my pulse quickened even more. The hallway was silent. The smell was gone, and the door looked just like any other in the building. I don't know why, but I knocked. Maybe I thought I'd hear the noises from the hallway. Maybe I thought I'd hear nothing at all. What I didn't expect was for someone to knock back. It was soft, almost polite. One knock, then another. My blood ran cold. There was no way someone was inside. I stood there, frozen, as the door creaked open just a crack. I couldn't see anything inside, just darkness, complete and suffocating. My hands shook as I slowly reached for the doorknob. I don't know why I did it, but I pushed the door open a little more, just enough to peek inside. The apartment was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no trash, nothing. But the smell, it was back. That same sickening, rotting stench, the smell of decay. And then I saw it. On the far wall, just barely visible in the dim light of my flashlight, there were markings of some sort. I slowly crept forward towards the wall. My flashlight shone on the area in question. These were scratches, deep gouges like someone had clawed at the walls. Just then I felt coldness envelop every inch of my body. I felt surrounded by something. I spun around rapidly, looking in every direction, and saw nothing. Suddenly, it felt like a single sharp claw was slowly tracing its way down the back of my neck. I screamed a guttural scream, and I ran out of the apartment as fast as my wobbly legs would take me. I heard the resonating sound of apartment 301's door being slammed behind me. I raced into my own apartment, throwing my door shut and fearfully latching every lock on my door. I worked hard to catch my breath. I had made it out, and yet the distance still didn't feel far enough from what I had just experienced. I don't know what's in 301. I don't know where the guy who lived there went or what those sounds are. But I do know one thing. Whatever's in that apartment isn't human. And it's still there, waiting.
Like and subscribe if you dare. And join us next time for another dark tale from the Twisted Typewriter.